Alright, hello. Welcome to the go-to guide to making your first 10 div. What you're going to need is some of these, one of these, some of these. So just a bunch of bubblegum currency. Nothing too special, nothing too crazy. Some glass blowers. Ooh, I'm kind of spoiling the strategy already. And you're going to need a bunch of eye level 85 flasks. And what we're going to be doing, you should already know what we're doing by this point, is we're going to be rolling non-aquamarine flasks. I should really get rid of these. Aquamarines are like the only flasks that you're not allowed to roll with this strat because they suck. And I have not seen a single build that uses them effectively. Okay, what are we doing? We are rolling flasks for profit. How are we doing this? Well, we are scouring every flask down. I was trying to look at mods, but it doesn't even really matter what they rolled because at the end of the day, this is for demonstration purposes. I'm not trying to make a crap ton of money doing this as well. I've already made my money. I'm trying to show you how to make my money, which isn't a lot. This is more of an entry-level strategy. I do want to preface it by saying this. This is more, actually, I consider this a side hustle. This is like a perfect example of a side hustle that you pick up playing PoE. The idea of this strategy is that while you're mapping, or even before you're mapping, say like at the very beginning of the league, you have been you've been going through the campaign, progressing, picking up rares, picking up a bunch of items that end up being crap, but you don't know that they're crap, and you need to make upgrades early on, so you need to be picking up crap, or items that can potentially be crap, and you should end up with a lot of alts. That's like phase one of this strat, is you shouldn't have to spend money on alts, you should just have a crap ton of alts sitting around. If you have to spend money on alts, it's totally fine. Current prices for alts are, I think it's I just bought a stack earlier, yeah, it's about 1 div to 500, but you shouldn't even really need to buy alts. It's the benefit of this strat is that it just requires bubblegum currency to get you off the floor. You roll your flasks, as I already did, for 20%. Then you slam a transmute on them. And you just look. So what we're looking for is exactly like a flask like this. I'm so glad we hit this on a transmute. I'm going to price check this first. This is a bismuth. So, could potentially not be worth that much. Partially because I don't have any other flasks that I'd really like to roll. Like, I'd really like to have rolled this on a diamond flask. That would have been perfect. But even this flask is okay. It's probably good enough to sell. There's not many of it like it on the market, but the important elements that make this a good flask or a good contender, because it's the probably number one question I'm going to get on this video, if I'm not good enough at explaining this, is what are we looking for? What are the affixes that make a good flask? Why do you stop rolling the flask when you roll it and think you have found something good? The reason you stop is because you did actually find something good. The way you find that out is you can try to use intuition, you can try to use things like research and all that crap, but I got your research tool for you right here, and it's just Control D with the PoE Awaken Trade macro, right? Literally just download Awaken PoE Trade and search the affixes on these flasks if you're at all curious. I have a good idea of what I'm looking for because I've done this strategy a lot. I've done this throughout leagues. This has been like my main side hustle for several leagues now, and with respect to just making some good side cash. And we kind of see a good example of it here. Now this is a sapphire flask with Ellie Res as its suffix. It's, I think, tier 2. No, it's a tier 3 low roll on the Ellie Res. So this is the kind of flask I would expect to sit in my stash for quite a while, but it will eventually sell to someone who's looking for exactly this. And again, you can wonder why someone's going to buy a flask like this. You can do that. And I could try to give you explanations. I can try to sit here and say, oh, that flagellant roll is really sick. It's the +3 charges when you're hit by an enemy. That means that any build that isn't using avoidance layers in its mitigation can basically have permanent uptime on this flask. If it's mapping, for many bosses, this flask is permanently up. It's got that extra Ellie Res roll on it, which can be really helpful. Just in general, I think players are starting to respect Ellie Res rolls on their flasks as builds and build creators are getting tighter and tighter, using more and more unique flasks. Look at my build, for instance. I'm using freaking like 7 uniques, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 uniques. I can't even hold a weapon. More and more people are using weapons. I really shouldn't try to get this deep with the explanation. Just understand that rolling additional elemental resistances on a flask, if it's a good enough roll, tier 3, preferably tier 2 and up, honestly, is not useless. It's actually quite useful for some builds. And Flagellance is incredible for most left-sided tree builds. Basically meaning, and you know, this is on a Sapphire base, if you didn't know, the utility bases, the ones with elemental resistances, naturally have a higher base uptime than, say, for instance, like a Jade, right? Take a Jade without a... This has nothing influencing the duration of the flask. Take a Jade and just compare it to like well, this one has increased duration. Does this right here? You don't have increased duration, but you're an Amethyst flask. Amethyst is not the same kind of elemental that I'm talking about, and this was the one with increased duration. Can we just find a ruby? Here's a ruby. Check this out. This ruby has less quality than this jade flask, and neither of them have anything increasing the duration, but this ruby flask lasts longer, and that's just because elemental flasks naturally have a higher base duration to them. So this bad boy right here lasting for nearly 10 seconds, and then also having that flagellance roll on it means that it's basically going to be up permanently. So this is just a fantastic flask for, like, I could see Pathfinders using this. I could see some I don't want to say chieftains, but I can see like Balbalas, Trader Keystone setup builds wanting a flask like this, maybe. Especially because that extra Ellie res roll on the at the bottom there. I actually am not sure though. A Trader build, a build using the Balbala Trader Brutal Restraint Keystone might not want the Flagellant type roll. They might actually prefer like reduced charges per use. The important thing to note is that I don't need to worry about why this flask is useful. I just need to worry about the fact that, hey, with these two rolls, Awakened PoE trade says that it'll probably sell for 20 to 30 C. So boom, I consider that a sale. So I throw it in a dump tab and leave it alone. And that's the entirety of this strategy. I'm going to keep doing it, but as I'm doing it, I'm going to just kind of deliberate more about why this strategy is powerful and focus a lot less on what I'm actually doing and rolling, because truthfully I don't think it really matters too much. You know, I can find like a bismuth flask here, roll it for increased duration, increased freeze, shock, and ignite effect. I don't really think this mod is particularly powerful at all, but hey, with just a tier 1 increased duration, it looks like this might even sell for like 15C as is. I'm gonna keep rolling over it, but just trying to really demonstrate the point that well-rolled flasks, really with any mods, as long as they're high tier, is probably, well-rolled flasks, and well-rolled in this case meaning that they have like 2 decent tiers of any affixes on them. Those things sell. These things just sell. That's the main point of this video, is you'd be surprised, like a flask like this, right? There's a bismuth with attack speed and gain of flash charge on crit strike. Might not seem like it is a particularly like consistent flask. I don't think builds immediately come up. I could see cast on crit. Cast on crit could use this, but at the same time, cast on crit, usually they hit certain breakpoints with their attack speed, where they want to be very particular about how much attack speed they get. So maybe not even a cast on crit, but I could definitely, like, in my brain, I could see a cast on crit, Forbidden Rite, Mage Blood build using a flask like this. Let's check the trade website to see. Hey, looks like even though there's only a few, this might even sell for 20 or for 60 to 70 C. I'm going to personally throw it up for 40 C because, again, I'm just trying to move product. I don't care too much about getting the most bang for my buck. I care about rolling a lot of good flasks and flooding the market with them, which brings me to my next point, which is I don't know if this strategy is going to be as powerful of a strategy as it is now currently for me if like the entire PoE community starts doing it. In fact, I almost guarantee this strategy will not be very useful if everyone does it. It is because people are lazy, it is because people don't like rolling their flasks, that I will roll flasks and find flasks like this, where I just found a sapphire flask with increased effect, which now on these kinds of flasks, on resistance flasks, confer to an extra max res. So this is actually giving you 6%. I can demonstrate that right now. Right, I have 75, 75, 75, put it on 81. Even though that says 85, or even though that says only 5% max res. Increased effect, incredibly valuable, and that's a tier 1 cast speed roll. I bet this will sell for a div. Okay, maybe, but I don't know. I see, again, it says it's all over the place on the price. You check it, hit the search, 20, 35, 40, 40, 50, 50, 100. I look at that and I'm just like, throw it up for 50C. Hey, who knows, right? Maybe it'll sell, maybe it won't. All I know is whether this sells or not. I only spent like 3 alts and 4 glass blowers on it. So if this does end up selling, I make 50C. If this doesn't end up selling, I basically used nothing. And that's how I make my money. That's how I make. This is probably how I make 25 to 30% of my currency every league. Is unironically sitting in my hideout, doing this for. I think I'll probably spend like cumulative total. I'm just trying to think. I'm thinking like how much time do I spend a league doing this? And look, this. I mean, I knew it from the move speed. 14% move speed is one off perfect. No, it's literally perfect. And then charge recovery is a usable affix. So I was like, oh, this is going to be valuable, and I'll throw it up for a div. And again, I've been doing this strategy for a while. I've been doing this for league straight, so I have an idea of what to look for. And you might be thinking at home, you might be like, well, that's the knowledge I care about, Wired. Tell me what you know about. Tell me the secret tricks. I'm trying to do that, right? I'm telling you things like increased move speed. If you get a literal perfect, like tier 1 14% move speed roll, which you can only find on eye level 85 flasks, by the way, that's why it's important to roll these eye level of 85, is so you can always enroll yourself in the I got a tier 1 perfect roll of move speed on I got the of cheetah suffix. That's you're trying to enter that raffle every single time you hit alteration orbs on a flask, because as it turns out, just having the of cheetah mod, specifically a 14% cheetah mod on your flask, especially if it's a quicksilver, especially if it's a quicksilver with increased effect, yeah, you're going to be looking at a few divs, right? You're going to be looking at, well, like in the case of this flask right here, which is not that flask. It's a different kind of flask. It is a diamond flask with increased effect, that powerful mod I just told you about, and 1% off perfect crit strike chance during effect. And according to trade website, this will sell for about 4 divs. Maybe 3 to 4 divs, who knows? I'm going to be putting it up for 3 div, or I'm going to be putting it up for 4 div, and I'm going to be holding it, keeping it in my stash tab until this bad boy moves. Because I actually predict that the price of these bad boys will go up over the course of a league unless people actually catch on to this video. So again, I've made this video probably long-winded enough. I want to just roll one more flask to show you guys this is not random. I'm not just getting lucky. You'd think I have a streamer client. Look at this. This is a sulfur flask, tier 1 reduced charges per use. I'm already thinking, okay, Balbala's reduced charges per use, Trader Keystone, literally perfect roll. If they need a sulfur flask, here you go. And we also hit tier 1 lowest roll on the tier 1 from within the tier, but additional elemental resistances flask. This will sell, and I knew it. This will sell for sure. I could absolutely see a Balbala's build using this if they need conk ground, but even if they don't need conk ground, just this is set up for any trader build that wants it. So I'm going to put this up. I'm going to put this personally. I'll put this up for 100C. You can sell that for however much you want. I'm going to roll another one because that was so cheap and quick to make, which is the entire point of the strategy. Here's another sulfur flask with a literal perfect charge recovery. I think it was 50, wasn't it? Wasn't it literally 50? Unfortunately, we rolled this dead-ass chance to ignite. This will probably still sell for 20C, but it'd probably be difficult to move it. Like, I could see it just not selling for a while, so I'm going to leave it in there. I want to find one flask that has the... that has a good armor or evasion roll as its suffix, because like basically something like this, but with the tier being 1, because those flasks really sell. Reduced effective shock. It's kind of sad to see this because what you actually want to see is a void shock. So reduced effect of shock, chill, ignite. I don't think those are particularly slamming stats. I don't think those are good, but a void. Right, chance to avoid shock instead of reduced effect. If it's chance to avoid shock, that could be a very powerful mod. And the reason that could be a very powerful mod is because of the unique jewel Storm Shroud, which I can show real quick here. Again, this is where it does pay a little bit to have some game knowledge. The existence of this jewel, leveraging chance to avoid shock to apply instead to all elemental elements. This jewel alone makes that suffix, the avoid shock, a very powerful suffix to be rolling on flasks if you can get tier 1. So almost good flask, unfortunately not. Let's keep rolling. And I don't know if I said this, but I mean, I didn't say that. Maybe I didn't directly say this, but I think it's implied by the fact that I'm rolling multiple flasks at once. That you should be doing this, in my opinion, you should be doing this if you're trying to implement the strategy with multiple flasks. You should be trying to roll multiple flasks at once. It just makes the whole process a lot smoother. Get a bunch of flasks together. You probably already have a few if you've been holding on to them. If they show up on your, I'm going to put this in a 20C tab because there was only a few of them up there. But if you're looking for a way to make money and you especially already have a bunch of flasks just lying around, consider rolling them and throwing them in a dump tab. You would be surprised by what sells and what doesn't. I'm serious. You would genuinely be surprised by what it takes, or how little it takes rather, to create a sellable flask for players. This is a amethyst with increased effect, reduced effective curses. This will sell for 40C. There's quite a few of them listed on the trade website. I'm going to list mine for 35C. And we're just going to just let it sit in the dump tab, you know? This one, I think I've price checked this bismuth like 3 times at this point. I also just don't think bismuths are the best base to be crafting on too. So I'm gonna adjust my criteria a little bit. I said earlier that you should avoid aquamarine flasks, and I may have said in this take that the same applies to corundum. I also think that bismuth can be a little bit questionable to craft on bismuth. It's not always useless. In fact, I dare say it's not useless at all. There are absolutely builds that make use of bismuth flasks, but those builds are going to be predominantly Mageblood builds, and I think bismuths are better to roll later on in the league when those builds start really when more people acquire their Mageblood, basically. So we'll roll a few more sulfurs, rubies, and sapphires, and we'll call it a day here. I really just want to keep hitting good rolls that are different, so that I can kind of show you like this right here. Like, hey, this is kind of like that diamond flask I showed you earlier. It's on a ruby base. I wonder if this would sell. And it will. Why? Because, and I don't want to necessarily, I want to caveat, every time I say because, it's my explanation. You know, I can use any post hoc rationalization to justify why I think it's valuable. Ultimately, it's valuable for a variety of reasons. This is how all markets work. I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you why the market works the way it does. I'm just going to try to, all I'm doing is prognosticate. I'm just sitting here saying, hey, here is a result. This is why I think it is that, right? I'm just kind of hypothesizing. I don't actually know if there's like a secret trickery build out there that's like, we need a ruby flask and it needs to have these exact like I'm not crafting for that build, which is again why this is a super effective entry level profit craft. You don't need to have a specific build in mind that you're crafting for. You're just crafting generally good items that most people can make use of somewhere or another. In this case, it's a ruby flask. It has increased effect. That means no matter what build uses this, it's going to be getting an extra max res. That's super valuable. It's going to be getting extra fire res out of its flask. That's also super valuable. It's tier 1, which means the reduced duration aspect of it is not that penalizing. That's super valuable for builds that aren't Mageblood. I'm going to quality it up so it's more attractive. And it's got a tier 1, 3% off perfect crit strike chance during effect mod. Most builds, I shouldn't say most builds. There's a lot of, very few builds in this game scale damage not using I would actually need aggregate numbers on that. It's so hard to generalize. In general, with life, it's if there's one generalization that is true, it's that generalizations are usually wrong, and then that especially applies to really deep, rich, complex systems such as the game of Path of Exile, which is obviously the game we're playing and crafting for. So it's hard for me to generalize, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go on a limb and say that this flask is useful for a variety of reasons, and I'm going to put it in a trade tab to reflect that. You know, that's where I'm at with this. Again, you don't need to research why these flasks are good. All you need to do is check the price and say, hey, looks like it'll sell. Hey, throw it into dump tab for 20C, even though it says maybe 30C. Sure, maybe it'll sell. This one, Spell Leech, Attack Leech. I was actually surprised this league to find out that actually, yeah, a lot of builds do make use of Spell or Attack Leech on a flask. So yeah, sure. Go ahead and roll for those two. This one, increased effect. I think that does apply to the conch ground that it throws on the ground. Here we go. Boom. Banger right here. 15% increased attack speed, increased duration, not perfect on the attack speed, but looks like it'll sell for 100C. Guess what I'm doing with that bad boy? Popping in a dump tab for 100C. Max charges, increased armor. I was looking for something like this. It'd be perfect if that armor roll was, was perfect, but it actually wouldn't be perfect. I have found that max charges is not a very coveted stat as a prefix. I guess I'm surprised by that because I actually thought that max charges was kind of similar to like, you know, reduced charges uses or increased duration, but apparently people do not see it that way. People do not value max charges as highly, at least in my observations, through the observations I've made. Also, increased block and stun recovery. I think it's just kind of like, if you're going to do anything with block and stun recovery, you just pick up Immutable Force and just call it a day. So even though that's quite a lot to roll on a flask, like you can roll up to 80% increased block and stun recovery. I think most builds just say fuck that. Like if I'm gonna worry about stuns at all, I'm gonna get an immutable force and not worry about them, or I'm gonna pick up unwavering stance and not worry about them, or I'm just gonna pick up Soul of the Brine King and pretend like I don't worry about them. So I think increased block and stun recovery, unfortunately, a bit of a dead suffix, especially when you consider the opportunity cost of like I could have rolled something different. But here we go, sulfur base, increased effect, and in fact, increased effect on a sulfur base. Since sulfur base increases your damage, and again, I'm just I don't know if this is for sure. What I do know is for sure is when I search the price and it says 50, 50, 100C, I have a pretty good idea then that it'll at least sell for 50C. But I'm going to sit here and try to guess why this could be a useful flask, right? I can tell you why I would use this flask. If I was a spellcaster build, right, that's conk effect, or sorry, that's consecrated ground, that's reduced curse effect is what I was trying to say. You're scaling the damage that is applied by the conk effect. Increased cast speed during effect is like a very good, feels good stat for actually, surprisingly, a lot of builds this league, because a lot of builds this league doing stuff with mana, they're doing stuff with like heavy cast speed, a lot of cast speed, trying to scale cast speed. Maybe you're even using lightning warp. I know lightning warp is a skill that you want good cast speed for. So cast speed, basically like attack speed, it's a feels good stat. Rolling it on a flask makes whatever you're doing feel better, and it's offensive, and it can be difficult to, especially on non-unique flasks, find damage on your flasks, right? If you're using a non-unique flask and you're trying to scale damage in some vector, it's a pretty good chance you're doing it through either a diamond flask or a sulfur flask. So, you know, getting those mods like cast speed or attack speed are can be useful on those flasks. Anyways, let's roll these last two. That's quite a lot of leech. Whoops, I'm using the wrong thing. Quite a lot of leech. Let's check it out. I don't think it'll sell. That's another reduced. That's unfortunate, because if that was a void shock, that would be a dope flask. That would be super good. If that was a void shock instead of reduced effect, I just want to emphasize this for a second. This would be a disgusting flask, in my opinion, for like some ballis kind of thing. You would be getting, with that increased charge recovery, you'd be getting permanent uptime on your sapphire flask. You'd be getting the 40 cold res permanently. I'm thinking about the build. I'm thinking ballis, Trader Keystone, you're a Captain Lance viewer. You have this flask, and if that flask said a void shock instead of reduced effect of shock, then you could slot in a storm shroud, and for one flask, you'd be getting most of your entire ailment avoidance, and 5 max res and 40 cold res permanently. So think about the build. Think about what if this flask was permanent, or what if somebody was using Trader with this flask. Then suddenly this flask is very useful. This one is an increased effect, which means an extra cold res, a max cold res, and a tier 3 cast speed roll. I don't think this is particularly valuable, but if you were so inclined, you could probably sell it for 10C. Come on, give me some big juicy evasion roll on one of these bad boys. This is tier 4 crit. I don't think this is going to get anything. 20C. And here we go. So, I shouldn't say here we go. This isn't going to sell. The flagellance is nice. It's a little bit of a conflict, because when you're doing flagellance, when you're doing anything with like masochist, gain charges when hit, you kind of, and I'm speaking from experience, I'm not speaking from like absolute knowledge, I cannot stress that enough. I'm just saying, when I have played flagellant or masochistic, or basically builds that do not mind getting hit and do not use avoidance layers as their main source of defense against, you know, the dark arts of whatever hits you in PoE. When you're using avoidance, you don't really get a lot of value out of those gain charges when you're hit, because you're not getting hit, right? And so increased evasion rating during effect to me says, okay, that's what we're probably not trying to lean on gain charges when you're hit as a source of charge generation. But, you know, that's my conjecture. When I price check it, it looks like it's selling. It looks like it's selling. Like, it looks like if I throw this in a dump tab for 30C, it'll move. And ultimately, that's what you should. I think that's the pinnacle point, actually, of what I'm trying to demonstrate here. Is screw my conjecture. I should talk less. Who cares why I think an item is particularly valuable or not? If you came to this video thinking that I was going to share some fabled wisdom and make you a 10x better Poe player, that wasn't actually the goal. The goal was to give you a quick, simple strat to replicate of roll flasks and price check them, and you'll make money. And that's actually just the strat. And so we're going to do that one more time, because this is a video that never ends. Tier 2 attack speed, literally perfect increased charge recovery on a ruby. I bet this will sell. I bet this will sell for a div, and I'm going to throw it in a dump tab and act like it will. So even if it doesn't, I'm going to act like it does. So there we go. I just rolled, 6, 7 flasks here. I bet I'll make at least 3 div. like within the next day or two. Just those cells trickling in. I wish I had. Did I have somebody message me earlier that I could demonstrate? Yeah, hey. Oh no, that's for. Yeah, here. I had these two guys message me earlier for what looks like different flasks that I rolled. Here's one for 13. Here's one for 20C. These things do sell. I guess I could show. I want to know what those flasks were. So here's a move speed, gain 2 charges. Here's a increased charge effect, reduced effect, increased charge recovery, armor on a quartz flask. I did not think this thing would sell. This guy was messaging me for 13C. I probably spent, again, like 1C making it. So this is a really effective way to make... I don't even want to say some startup currency or whatever, because you're going to make bank doing this. You will trickling in divines just by rolling really good quicksilvers and diamond flasks for dirt cheap, literally converting... You're an alchemist, right? You're literally converting dog shit bubblegum currency into divines. Think about that. If I told you that there's a lever you can push, or pull rather, because that's what you do with levers. You pull a lever and it takes your alteration orbs and turns them into divine orbs. And that lever is literally just the right click mouse button on a flask. I just rolled over like flagellants, but either way, if that's all it took, you would pull that lever, right? How many times would you pull that lever a day? That's going to be the outro rhetorical question. How many times would you pull that lever? If I told you that you could roll flasks like this bad boy and sell them on trade for 30C, and all you had to do was pull the lever, how many times would you pull that lever? All right, I love you all.